I want you to picture this. It's 3 in the morning. You're half asleep, and you hear your front door open and close, and then open again and close again. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself your roommate just has a lot of friends. But here's the thing about lies we tell ourselves. They only hold up until they don't. And the night everything finally made sense was the night I genuinely thought I might not make it out of that apartment alive. This is the story of the 6 months I spent living with someone who was running one of the most organized drug distribution operations I had ever heard of, and I didn't even know it until it was almost too late. Let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense unless you understand where I was in my life at that point. I was 23, just moved to a new city for a new job, entry-level position at a logistics company. Decent pay, not enough to rent alone. A buddy of mine connected me with a guy who was looking to split a 2-bedroom apartment. His name was Marcus. First impression? Quiet, clean, respectful. He said he worked from home, freelance consulting, he called it. I didn't ask more questions. I figured he was just one of those low-key tech guys who kept to himself, paid his bills on time, and never touched your food in the fridge. And honestly, for the first 2 weeks, that's exactly what he seemed like. He cooked his own meals, he kept his room door closed, he said good morning when we crossed paths in the kitchen. Normal, completely, boringly normal. I remember thinking I had genuinely won the roommate lottery. And then things started to feel slightly off. It started with the visitors. Now, everyone has friends who come over, that's normal, but Marcus had a very specific kind of visitor. They didn't ring the bell, they knocked 3 times, always 3 knocks, and they were never there for more than 5 minutes, in and out, sometimes twice in one evening. I noticed it on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on the couch watching something on my laptop, and within 2 hours, I counted 4 different people walk through that front door. None of them spoke to me. None of them even looked at me. They went straight to Marcus's room, and then they left. I convinced myself it was none of my business. That was my mistake. I kept convincing myself it was none of my business. Then came the cash. I want to be very specific here because this is where my brain started having a very hard time explaining things away. It was a Saturday morning. Marcus had left his bedroom door slightly ajar, which he never did, and I walked past it on my way to the bathroom. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't looking for anything, but I glanced in for half a second, and what I saw made me stop walking completely. There was a table in the corner of his room, and on that table were stacks of cash. Not like someone had emptied their wallet. I mean rubber-banded, organized, stacked piles of cash. The kind of money you see in movies and think nobody actually has lying around like that in real life. I kept walking, got to the bathroom, stood there gripping the edge of the sink looking at myself in the mirror. My brain went through every possible explanation. Maybe he just got paid. Maybe he doesn't trust banks. Maybe he sold something. Maybe he just really likes having cash around. But something in my gut, some quiet, serious alarm had started going off. And once that alarm starts, it doesn't stop. I started paying much closer attention after that. I started noticing things I had unconsciously been ignoring for weeks. The faint smell of something chemical coming from under his door sometimes. The way he always stepped outside to take phone calls, even at midnight. The fact that his consulting work apparently required him to be up at all hours. The way he once intercepted a delivery driver before the guy could even knock on our door, like he'd been watching from the window. I started writing things down in my phone. Not because I had a plan, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. Visitor at 11:47 p.m. Same knock, 3 times. Gone in 4 minutes.
2 packages at 2 p.m. One is long and thin, one is about the size of a shoebox. Both picked up immediately. Smell, again, tonight, like rubbing alcohol, but heavier. Cash visible again. More than last time, I think. I had about 2 weeks of notes when the situation changed completely. One evening, a guy came over who was different from the others. He wasn't in and out in 5 minutes. He stayed, and I could hear them talking through the wall. Not the words, but the tone. Tense, low, like two people negotiating something neither of them was happy about. It lasted almost 40 minutes, and when the guy finally left, Marcus came out of his room and just sat at the kitchen table, which he never did. He just sat there, staring at nothing for almost 10 minutes. And then he looked at me and said very calmly, "You doing all right, man?" And I said, "Yeah, you?" And he said, "Just business stuff. You know how it is." I nodded like I did. I absolutely did not. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went back through everything in my head. The 3-knock visitors, the daily packages, the rubber-banded cash, the chemical smell, the midnight phone calls, and now this tense, extended meeting with a guy who left looking like he'd just been warned about something. And that was the night I finally let myself think the thought I had been avoiding for 2 months. What if Marcus was dealing? And not dealing like some guy selling a little something on the side. What if this was actually organized? What if the apartment I was sleeping in every night was a distribution point? The moment I let that thought fully form in my head, everything rearranged itself. Every single thing I had been explaining away suddenly had a new, much simpler explanation, and I felt genuinely sick. I did something the next day that changed everything. I Googled one of the return addresses from a package I had managed to photograph with my phone a few weeks earlier. It came back as a vacant commercial property in another state. And then I Googled another one, a P.O. box registered to a business name that didn't seem to exist anywhere online. My hands were shaking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store for a long time after that, just thinking. Because now I had a much bigger problem. I wasn't just living with someone doing something illegal. I was living with someone who had clearly thought about logistics, someone who was careful, someone who had a system. This was not amateur hour. And I was on the lease. That thought hit me like a wall. My name was on the same lease as this apartment. If something happened, if someone came through that door with a badge, I was going to have a very hard time explaining that I noticed all of this and said nothing. I decided I needed to get out, but I needed to be smart about it. I couldn't just disappear overnight. Marcus would know something was wrong. I needed to act completely normal while I figured out my next move.
For the next week, I was the best, most normal roommate in the world. I said good morning. I offered him coffee. I watched TV in the living room like nothing in the world was bothering me. And the entire time, my heart was hammering in my chest every single minute. And then the thing happened that forced my hand completely. I came home one afternoon to find 2 men I had never seen before standing in our living room. Not Marcus's usual 5-minute visitors. These were different, older, harder looking. One of them was sitting on my couch. The other one was standing near the window with his arms crossed. Marcus introduced me like nothing was unusual, said they were partners, said they were just stopping by. The one on the couch looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Marcus says you mind your own business. That true?" And I looked at him and I said, "Completely." He nodded slowly, like he was filing my answer somewhere. I went to my room, closed the door, and did not come out until I heard them leave over an hour later. That was the end of me trying to be calm about this. I called my buddy who had connected me with Marcus in the first place, told him what was going on. He went completely quiet on the phone for a long time, and then he said, "Bro, you need to listen to me very carefully. Marcus is not small time. I heard some things recently. You need to get out of that apartment, like this week." I asked him what he meant by not small time. He told me that word had gotten around in certain circles that Marcus was running a distribution chain across multiple cities, that the apartment
Our apartment was one of several stash and handoff points, that the operation had been running for almost 2 years, that some of the packages I had seen were not just coming in, they were going out too, repackaged and rerouted. The quiet freelance consultant with the closed bedroom door was managing a multi-city drug supply network out of a 2-bedroom apartment. And I had been his unknowing cover for 6 months, a regular, boring, normal roommate who made the whole place look completely residential. I don't know how long I sat there after that phone call, but I know exactly what I felt. It wasn't just fear, it was this deep, cold realization that I had been used, that my normalcy was a resource to him, that every time I waved to a neighbor or got my mail or paid the electric bill on time, I was helping this operation look legitimate. I reached out to a lawyer first, quietly, explained the situation without giving names, got advice on how to protect myself. Then I started the process of breaking my lease, citing a personal emergency, and I did it fast enough that Marcus didn't have time to understand what was happening until I was already mostly gone. I was out within 9 days. I learned about 3 months later, through my friend, that the apartment had been raided, that Marcus had been arrested along with several others, that the operation turned out to be even larger than my friend had described, spanning 4 cities, involving over a dozen people, and generating a level of revenue that made those stacked piles of cash in his room look like pocket change. And I remember reading all of that and feeling 2 things at exactly the same time. The first was relief so overwhelming it almost felt like grief, because it was finally over, because I was not in that apartment, because my name was not in that report. The second thing I felt was a very quiet, very honest reckoning with myself, because I had seen the signs. I had seen them early. I had cataloged them, photographed them, written them down in my phone, and still I kept explaining them away. Kept telling myself it was none of my business, kept choosing comfort over truth because the truth was too frightening to fully accept. That is the part of this story I think about most now. Not Marcus, not the raid, not the men who sat on my couch and asked if I minded my own business. I think about the version of me who stood at that bathroom sink, gripping the counter, looking in the mirror, and then walked away. Because I was so close in that moment to knowing exactly what was happening, and I chose not to. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is not the threat itself, it's the story you tell yourself so you don't have to face it. Trust what you see, trust what you feel, and if something in your gut tells you that the quiet guy with the closed door and the 3 knock visitors is not who he says he is, listen to it. Don't wait until someone is sitting on your couch asking if you mind your own business, because by then, you're already in it.